This is Erin with the Thrive Yoga Fit Transformational Coaching Podcast. So, I'm doing these live streams. So, if you see my face, I am actively recording a podcast, but I thought it would also be interesting for people to see my process and to sometimes it's easier to connect when you have a face. So, some people connect a little bit more visually, or they're more kinesthetic, or they're more sort of like audio connectors and learners. So I figured I would give different avenues for people to feel connected to the words that I'm speaking. So today's podcast is going to be about tension caused by trapped emotions. So it's funny because this podcast is completely inspired by a meme, and there's Facebook memories, and this one meme popped up that has a little skeleton, and it says 6 types of muscle tension caused by trapped emotions. So, um, my experience is that everything I'm about to say is true. And I used to work, and actually I've been kind of missing the fact that I used to work at a wellness facility with an acupuncturist. And she's near and dear to my heart, though we've kind of gone separate ways. I'll always appreciate the things that she's taught me and the relationship that we had when we would, work on each other. And, just kind of, we were in this zone where we were really into healthy living and, you know, um, experimenting with different supplements, Chinese formulas, learning energy systems, and going to workshops together. It was really a big time of growth for me in my life. And I really learned so much. I worked there for about 4 years until I opened up my yoga studio, Thrive Yoga and Fitness, which Thrive Yoga and Fitness has been open 6 years. Can you believe it? Sometimes I can't. It's like life, you blink and it's just, it's really time is not it's an illusion, but it seems to go by so quickly, doesn't it? And there's some times in my life where, things seem like they last forever, and then other times, like, you blink and it's gone. So, but I really treasure that time that I, was working in that facility, and we worked, with, clients together. And like I said, I learned so much, and it opened up my eyes, and I was on this, path to healing. I had become very sick with adrenal fatigue right beforehand, and I wound up for months. I'd lie in bed and barely have energy to get up and go to the bathroom. And I had relied on my insurance, and they were doing all these like bariatric type tests on me and gastrointestinal tests. So I had to swallow barium and had like be poked and prodded with needles, and nobody could give me an answer. And I felt terrible, and was just getting worse. And on top of that, I had an eating disorder, and I was like starting to heal from it, and with a passive addiction. So my organs were just like overloaded, and there were so many answers wasn't getting, and I didn't know how to process my emotions. And so during that time where I was bedridden, I poured over nutrition books. I really started deeply getting into yoga, even more so than I had been. And I found so many answers within myself. I detoxified myself on such a huge level because I was resting. And with the combination of pranayama, breath control, along with the other limbs of yoga, and, you know, eating a certain way and resting and just learning so much, I really transformed, and I became able to actually like digest my emotions. Um, so I guess that's where I'll start with it's a little bit out of order, but maybe I'll read the order first, and then I'm going to go into the stomach. So the 6 types of muscle tension caused by trapped emotions: shoulder tension equals burdens and responsibilities; neck tension, fear and repressed self-expression; upper back, grief, sorrow, and sadness; middle back, insecurity and powerlessness; lower back, guilt, shame, and unworthiness; stomach, inability to process emotions. So, in Chinese medicine, as well as in Ayurvedic medicine, the health starts in the gut, really. So, when I, collapsed and I, was bedridden, I was just unable to process everything and it just became so heavy. So, the first thing I read, just like the burdens and responsibilities of life, I couldn't handle any of it because I was unable to digest anything that was happening to me because I had this pattern of disconnecting from myself and then numbing out. And that was my life for a long time, very extremely. I didn't realize peace existed within. I didn't know God as intimately as I know now. And it just seemed daunting. I didn't even know where to begin. I didn't have really many tools, though I was starting to sharpen them with yoga and meditation. And this was not 10 years ago when I was in this place. It was my journey began really going inward around when I actually learned how to breathe properly in yoga, probably about 14 years ago. Um, so once I started learning how to stay present with myself, then I started being able to digest my emotions. And it was amazing because, not completely, I had a lot to work through, but there was a glimmer of hope as far as my digestive issues. I eliminated certain things, but it basically took the burden, the taxing effect off of my organs, like my liver, which I had abused a lot, my stomach and my small intestine, and I allowed without all that volume of emotions that I couldn't digest because I started being able to sit and be present and have patience with myself. My body started activating again and digesting things that had been built up in my body for a long, long time. Just things that I didn't know how to deal with. I was never taught. And, everybody has that to a certain extent. And we all have our coping mechanisms, right? So mine was bulimia and, drinking and pills for a long time. And then I stopped drinking and pills because, um, I developed an ulcer and it stopped. Like I didn't even get any relief from those things anymore. So then I turned to food and it actually at first intensified because rather than spreading out my distractions, numbness, and addictions, I only had one for a while. And then I started rotating things back in, et cetera. But when I gained the ability to start processing my emotions even a little bit, I started shifting, I started changing, and I started being able to take more risks in my life because I could handle the, inherent anxiety that comes with taking risks, right? There's doubt, there's, you're not sure if the next stepping stone will appear, but you develop a sense of trust and faith that it will happen for you. And you have to be able to sit in those uncomfortable emotions. And I started to be able to do that. And then, one summer I took the very brave leap of getting certified as a personal trainer and, went through yoga teacher training and got actually a lot of certifications in addition to the ones I had, started doing body work. And then, I came across the acupuncturist and we really hit it off and we worked together for 4 years. Um, so I healed a lot of things around my stomach and the process, it wasn't just like a switch. It's like, oh, all of a sudden I can digest everything in my emotions. No, it's a constant practice. There's certain times where, the burden of, and maybe that's the next point I'll get to, the burden of like carrying the weight of the world starts to feel overwhelming. I have a friend who owns a coaching company and her website is losethementalweight.com. And I just think lose the mental weight is like just such a great phrase because it starts in our mind, thinking that we have to take on the burden of the world or of other people. And it becomes daunting. And if we look at our reasons for doing that, sometimes it's because we don't want to deal with the burden of ourselves or we even view it like that, right? It's not just, uncomfortable things come up. If we can learn to stay in the discomfort, we can learn how to process it. And just because something's uncomfortable does not mean anything has gone wrong. And I have to say that to myself often because of my pattern of disconnect. The mind, like the lizard part of the brain, the very primal part is like, oh, this hurts. It's not right. It's good. Abort, abort, or it's not good. Abort. Um, when we learn how to have a pause and we learn, yes, ma'am, When we learn how to have a pause and stay in our discomfort, then we can actually work through it, not thinking it's wrong. When we think it's wrong, we reject it and it becomes trapped within us, right? So when we accept discomfort as part of purification, right, in the concept of shaucha, um, then we are able to work through it and get to the other side of it, right? So, uncomfortable things in our lives come up a lot of times so we can look at them. But if we don't have that ability first to digest, right, then we can't handle these things to come up. And I get it. And then we'd want to numb out. So, getting your digestion right is the number one thing, right? And I'm not just talking about physically, though it's all tied together, right? But the mental and emotional, like staying present with yourself. So easier said than done, right? But it's the first big thing that I recommend working on. Not stealing what is not yours is a concept in yoga, asteya, that I mentioned just earlier. So not stealing the quote unquote burdens of the world and putting them on your shoulders. They're not yours for the taking. No, no, no. And there's even things that you might just look at in your life, and it's really not yours to worry about, right? There's the concept of giving it up to God, right? Ishwara, surrender. That's there for a reason because we're not meant to do it on our own. So, the next thing, as far as tension caused by trapped emotions, neck tension, fear, and repressed self expression. Oof. I see this so often in women, and actually, not just women, but in my YTT group, in my trainees, I had everybody raise their hand for the area, the particular chakra that they felt was like tense or blocked, and like I don't know, it was like 80% when I got to the throat chakra. Everybody raised their hand, and there's a reason for that is because, everything from when we were young, maybe we felt like our voice wasn't heard, we weren't seen, or we got reprimanded for expressing ourselves. Or sometimes, our truth changes, right? And we have to be forgiving and okay with that. For example, when I first became a yoga teacher, like a long ass time ago, the things that I taught, like that was from my place of truth. And I taught that sincerely. Since then, my concept of what is appropriate, et cetera, as far as like postures and the way that you do them, my truth has changed a little bit. And that's okay. And I don't beat up that person in the past because she spoke her truth too. But so often we don't speak our truth. And I've had, by the way, plenty of times where I've not spoken my truth. um, and it's not a great feeling, and we hold it back and in because for different reasons. We fear that if we speak our truth, again, we'll be reprimanded, we'll be kind of swatted down. It's very scary to open up and be truthful. It's nerve wracking, and then, have somebody judge you for it. But when we create that safety on the inside and we're able to withstand the anxiety of showing our true selves, and letting people have their opinions and judgments, because I mean, let's be real, everybody does. Like, somebody watching me recording this might have a judgment of whatever in their mind, but it's a projection of themselves on me and something they don't accept about themselves. Boom. And I do it too. We all do it. But speaking your truth anyway, right? And being okay with the feelings that come up. Again, that goes back to the stomach, right? If you're not right in your tummy, and you can't handle the feelings that come up because you feel like you'll be trapped by them forever, then yeah, of course you wouldn't speak up. So, all right. So, stomach, inability to process emotions. We discussed that. Staying present, breathing deep, listening to your inner cues. Shoulder tension, burdens and responsibilities. Don't take what's not yours. Drop it. Let it go. Neck tension, fear and repressed self-expression. So another thing that everyone's dealing with now is fear, because everyone wants an answer. Your brain wants an answer for what's going on right now. I mean, there's a bunch of answers out there. Are they the right ones? I don't know. You probably don't know, and that's okay. Um, And so, like, fear comes up, the mind fears what it does not understand. Um, we can choose to replay that over and over again, right? And just keep our mouth shut and just take it, or we can find a safe space to where we can express, because as far as truth goes, your inner experience of what's happening right now with you is your truth. And the more that you breathe and you go inward, the more clear that truth will be, but willing to work through it. One more thing that I'll mention is with my partner, I had to get over, that sometimes my feelings seemed irrational, but they were still valid. And that was a weird concept for me because I felt like they had to be perfectly true. And I didn't want to risk like saying something, I don't know, that didn't make sense or that I still hadn't quite figured out. But because my partner's so compassionate and he was such a good communicator, um, he worked through his stuff too. I'm not saying he came like super perfect to our relationship. He didn't, and neither did I. But we found a way to hold space for one another and just talk out fears without really getting sucked into the other story. So, communication with ourselves and our relationships is really important, and that can relieve the neck tension and fear of expression. Upper back grief, sorrow, sadness. So, in Chinese medicine, grief is held in the lungs. I'm not sure if it's the same in Ayurveda. It might be. I know there's a lot of like crossover, but I'm more familiar with Chinese medicine. It just speaks to me a little bit more, maybe. Um, but grief will hold it in our lungs. And if you think of somebody grieving, the sound of happens a lot, right? It's like we're grieving past relationships, or a feeling that we long for, or a version of ourselves that we miss. The feeling of touch for a lot of people. I've you know been in the presence of a lot of people who it's like, I haven't been touched or hugged in like 2 months. That's really hard, you know, that grief that comes up, like grieving for that sense of love and comfort. There's so many things that we can grieve about. And for whatever reason, I seem to be able to process grief, maybe better than most. I don't know why. There's definitely other emotions like disappointment and shame that I would just want to hide from. But grief, there is a sweetness to being able to expand grief within you and within your lungs and work through it. And maybe if you're listening to this, you are starting to breathe a little bit deeper, because I think, in the world, the global sense, we are all grieving from our past lives, like, not just like, deaths and rebirths, et cetera. We can get into that. Or just like our life a year ago. Right? It's different, and it's going to be different. And can that be okay? Sure, there's things you're going to miss, right? It's just like I've lived in Japan and I've lived in the United States. There's certain things I miss about both. There's pros and cons to both, and it's okay if I grieve. Um, you know. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Kim. Um, so yeah, it's okay. Like a huge part of these feelings is allowing them, right? The worst part about an emotion is resistance to it. I promise. But there's a lot of times we have to sort of carve out time for ourselves to experience, and that's what a lot of us don't do. And it's just sometimes it's not convenient. These big feelings come up, and it just, the first of all, the mind makes it seem daunting. The mind's like, oh, you really want to do that? Like, for example, if we want to take a big leap in our lives, take a risk, your mind's like, oh, not because the thing itself, because everything's neutral, right? If we look at it outside of us, like if you're familiar with the book of miracles, or sorry, A Course in Miracles, which is a lovely book, I highly recommend. But they have a lesson every day, and it's supposed to sort of recalibrate your brain to uh, look at the connections and associations that you've made, and how a lot of times they cause you pain, or you make associations that aren't necessarily true, that don't have to be true. Um, so can we, come back into our truth, and can we, find clarity within and process that grief, and make that time, right? You're worth it, and your truth is worth it. And so our next on the chart is middle back, insecurity and powerlessness. This is third chakra stuff, Manipura. So, having had an eating disorder, powerlessness, insecurity, lack of confidence, personal power being taken away, feeling like you're out of control. These are all symptomatic of a blocked third chakra. And a lot of times digestive issues will come from this. That was me, right? There was so much going on in my life that I just felt like I couldn't control. I didn't know how to process my emotions. That was the biggest one. I didn't know how to stay present with myself, and I didn't know there was anything outside of me. I was just so pulled into my pain body, as Eckhart Tolle would say. I didn't realize that God existed within, which is, and I was a very selfish person because of that. The greater consciousness, I didn't understand that concept at all. I know there's a lot of people that still don't, and that customizes our own personal hell when we have that lack of awareness. But it comes in stages. We start to realize there is more to us than just this mind body, than just these thoughts. There is a depth to us, and when we start being able to reach that, then the insecurity, I'm not saying it 100% goes away, because we still got to deal with this old girl up here, the mind and the thoughts, and not get caught up in the streams of it too much. But you need to have refuge to get out of. For example, I just recorded a meditation on abusive beliefs. To be able to shed the abusive beliefs, you have to have a safety to go to. You have to be able to expand the feeling of love and acceptance and compassion within you. You have to have somewhere else to jump to, right? If you're so used to having abusive beliefs within you, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, and those become like the regular flavor. It's like, for example, if you've been used to having vanilla ice cream your whole life and then somebody gives you some chocolate, it's like, this is different. This is foreign. It might take a little bit of getting used to, like an acquired taste. Joy and happiness and love can be acquired tastes. We can get so used to bashing ourselves and abusing ourselves that just becomes the usual radio station in our brain, the usual frequency. To change that, you need to create a safe space. Then you can start to make the jump bit by bit, and then you practice. You practice your new language. So, having lived in Japan, in another country, English is my native language, and I speak Japanese. Okay, like I'm not fluent, but I've put some effort in for a couple of years, so I'm more than just where's the grocery store level. But, being there, I had to like continually get out of my comfort zone, and I had to force myself to go down the path that wasn't as worn. And I would put myself purposely in situations where I would have to speak Japanese. And that's how I got better at that language. And then I would purposely for the next 2 hours, I'm not going to speak any English. And I'm going to pretend like I don't know where I'm going, and I'm going to ask for directions from multiple people and just see if I can understand what they say. Just as an example. I got better. I got better at the language, right? I started to understand it. I started to feel it. When you can do that on the inside, right? I know it's uncomfortable at first, but you, just like when you unroll your mat for a yoga class, right? You dedicate that 1 hour to that practice. You can do that same thing in your life. Unroll your yoga mat and other aspects of your life, depending on what you want to, getting comfortable to be comfortable. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. You become a little bit more resilient the more that you willingly go into discomfort. And there's a certain satisfaction, there's a reward at the end. And when you associate going into discomfort with that reward system, just like how you do with low hanging fruit for gratification, you start to change your brain a little bit. You start to get a little bit more expansive. It becomes less difficult overall. There's going to be some days where it's still hard, but you form a relationship with yourself, knowing and trusting that you can do it. Yeah. So it's a good feeling. That's all I have to say about the middle back. All right. The last one, lower back, guilt, shame, and unworthiness. So some of you might know that I published a book a couple years ago called Thriving After Addiction. By the way, it's not just for people in addiction. I'm thinking of changing the name of the book because it's for like how to live your life. I've taken so many like tools and resources in that book and just jammed it into like a 12-week program. It also has like an online program with yoga practices and life coaching, all types of stuff. Um, but anyways, I released it, and the first emotions that we start to deal with are shame and guilt. Why? They're really heavy. It's like walking around with a backpack filled with bricks, right? It's heavy stuff. You're carrying around shame and guilt. It's just everything else in your life slows down. Oh, thank you. Yeah. I have some people popping up. So, hi, Jennifer. I met her at one of my retreats, and she is an amazing person. Just to watch her grow from afar is like, oh, it's like ambrosia for my heart. Um, being willing to work through shame and guilt. Like nobody wants to, I think of Brene Brown, who is like one of the top shame researchers. Nobody wants to talk about shame. Why? Because shame wants to hide. Like I want to hide behind my microphone. Shame likes a dark corner. When we start speaking about the things that we're shameful about, it's scary. Like there's fear that comes up, fear of judgment, fear of our own judgment. But it can be quite liberating. And so, as far as in the body with that guilt and shame, like lower back issues, um, I did a combo session with, by the way, his name is Carlos from Cambo Warrior. Warrior. I think I said that weird. Cambo Warrior. There we go. Cambo Warrior. He is located in Florida, one of the most compassionate individuals I've ever worked with. And he did a chakra balancing treatment of Cambo. And we worked on the root because I had a lot of shame coming up. I sort of accessed this, I guess, deeper space of my sexuality. And the lines kind of got blurred with everything, and I didn't know what was what. And we did that session, and I realized that there was a whole bunch of shame that was blocking me from really understanding my truer self. And, he sat there with me. I cried, and I just like let go of so much of that shame, and I felt so much lighter. And then my heart was able to open up, and I didn't feel like I was carrying around those bricks. So, totality of the body. Your body speaks. It might be a different language, but it speaks. Be willing to, forget English for a little while and learn Japanese or learn Spanish or, you know, the frequency, the language, the whisperings of your heart and of your body. It's softer, it's different. And just because it's uncomfortable doesn't make it wrong. It's there for you to listen to, but you have to quiet the chitta-vrittis of the mind. You have to learn how to drop in, and it takes practice. You have to be willing to show up. You have to be willing to put on the white belt. Another thing I really love about my partner is, he's willing to put on a white belt in a lot of ways, and he's very humble about his double black belt that he has in judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Be willing to put on the white belt. It's hard for the ego, but when you get over the ego and you drop into and know your greater purpose, if you're on a spiritual path, I find that that's the way that kind of tames the ego. Is like, yeah, this ain't about you. This is about raising my consciousness, and I'm going to let go of these things that I've been attaching myself to and find a deeper purpose and truth within me. And if there's any time when I don't want to meditate, I just repeat in my head, so you don't have 20 minutes or 30 minutes to listen to the words of God? And then I'm like, yeah, you're right. I think I can make that time for infinite wisdom to pulse through me. So just a reminder that your mind, your body, spirit, it's all connected. That's why I'm so fascinated with experiencing the body. I teach yoga. I do body work. I'm a life coach. I want to know the intimate parts of myself as well as the, intimate parts of people around me. Meaning their soul and the connection, and how being blocked from it has manifested in different ways. In behaviors and body tensions. And so these muscular patterns of body tension that we keep, by addressing them from a spiritual standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, like just going in there from different angles, you get to understand and experience yourself in different ways. which maybe that's what it's all about, right? So I hope that you have a fantastic day. Again, happy Mother's Day. You might be listening to this podcast a few weeks afterwards, but just know that I'm sending you some love. You may have noticed that my podcast name has changed to Thrive Yoga Fit, Transformational Coaching Podcast, because I feel like I've evolved. I, of course, will never forget my past, but I want to embrace the woman who I am right now as a boss babe. And I want to be able to reach a broader audience. The things that I talk about are still applicable very much to eating disorders and, addictions, but I'm just taking it in a slightly different direction. So I'd like to think that if you've been listening to my podcast for a while, it wasn't just for that particular title, but you know that I speak my heart and that I'm authentic and that I'm going to keep showing up in that way for you. And by putting myself in a box and staying there and not being willing to break the box, I would not be walking the walk that I talk. So I think y'all probably get that. So, one more thing that I'll announce is right now I am doing a recorded customized meditations. They are $35 per meditation. I make this specifically for you, so you're my audience, but I also release it on Insight Timer. I don't say your name or anything or any like sort of quote unquote giveaway traits, but whatever you want recorded that you feel like you need, I will record it with you in mind. And I'm going to ask you some specific questions to where it will be tailored exactly for you. But that doesn't mean that you can't help the world with it. So, all right, I think that's it. Thank you so much and have a fantastic day. Namaste.